Hey everybody, welcome to the Addiction Unlimited podcast, where you get to learn everything you want to know about addiction and recovery. I'm your host, Angela Pugh, co-founder of Kansas City Recovery, life coach, and recovering alcoholic. To learn more about me, you can listen to episode 0 on your podcast app or find us on the web at addictionunlimited.com. Hello, my friend. Welcome back to Addiction Unlimited, where we get honest about life after alcohol and what it really takes to get our shit together and build an unlimited life. So listen, you don't heal once and live happily ever after, right? You don't work on your character one time and become enlightened. You don't quit drinking and magically become the healthiest version of yourself. This work never ends. And if that sentence annoyed you a little, then you are exactly who this episode is for. When I got sober, alcohol wasn't my biggest problem anymore. I was. And for me, you've probably heard me share this before, my temper was the first thing I worked on. I could be really mean, judgmental, and condescending because anger made me feel powerful. And honesty, forget it. When I was drinking, I lied constantly. When I got sober, I didn't have a lot of things to lie about anymore, like that chaos was gone, but the instinct to lie didn't vanish, right? I still caught myself telling little white lies to avoid uncomfortable situations or protect my ego. And I hated that. So anger and honesty became the first character defects I worked on. And here's what I learned really fast. Character defects don't disappear just because you start working on them. They don't evaporate because you journaled about them or just dissolve with time. They are living parts of you. And when stress rises or fear creeps in or you get worn down or disconnected, guess what? Those old versions of you will happily come back to drive the bus. That's why this whole idea that more sober time equals more maturity is garbage, right? Character isn't measured in time. It's measured in effort and behavior. And as life continues to happen, new layers of work reveal themselves. Like I was 4 years sober before I worked on codependency, 13 years sober before I ever touched trauma work, 15 years sober before I realized I had ADHD, 18 years sober before my financial irresponsibility knocked me on my ass, and I'm still rebuilding from that today. This work doesn't stop, it expands. Every stage of life exposes a new place where I still have work to do. And here's a piece of this that nobody talks about enough. Sometimes the warning sign isn't emotional chaos. Sometimes it's emotional numbness. You see this a lot in long-term sobriety. Life feels flat, repetitive, emotionally dull, and you're just going through the motions. This is what we refer to as a rut. You're in a rut, that quiet, heavy, restless space. No joy, no spark, no goals. The kids are grown, your relationship feels like logistics, your job doesn't light you up, and every day feels like you're just copying and pasting it from yesterday. You're not falling apart, but you're definitely not fired up about life either. It doesn't matter how long you've been sober, we can all feel this. But that's a sign that your emotional growth has stalled. And this is exactly where people relapse, not always on alcohol, but on chaos or shopping or food, porn, overworking, emotional drama, anything to feel something again. And this is why emotional sobriety matters. Character work matters. Because if you don't grow, you decay. If you don't lead your life, you drift. And drifting is just relapse in slow motion. So today we're going to get real about what character defects actually are, why they show up even after years of sobriety sometimes, and how to build the emotional fitness you need, not just to stay sober, but to evolve and have the life you really want. When you get sober, quitting alcohol is like removing a load-bearing wall in your house. Yes, that wall was rotting. Yes, that thing needed to go. But now the whole structure has to figure out how to hold itself up without that wall. And that takes time and work, real work. Let me read you a few things that I've gotten in the last week or so in my social media, DMs and comments and things like that, because some of this stuff, it really makes me sad, right? Somebody said, anyone else depressed after quitting? Why do I feel so emotional after quitting? All of my friendships revolved around alcohol. Now I'm sober and have no friends. Life is just less complicated because I don't have to deal with all the issues alcohol brought, but I still don't feel like myself. You hear that? Sobriety solves the alcohol problem. It doesn't solve the everything underneath problem. And that's where people get stuck because they think I quit drinking, I should feel better. I'm doing everything right. Why am I still anxious? I should be grateful. Why do I feel flat? And the real truth of the situation is you remove the substance, but you're still running the same psychological patterns that made you need it in the first place. Your ego, still protecting itself with control and denial. Your excuses, still running defense to avoid accountability. Your emotional regulation, still trying to figure out how to work without a numbing agent. One person said this perfectly. They said, it gets worse, then stabilizes, then gets better. That's the arc. And most people quit somewhere in the worst part because they think they're doing it wrong, but you're not. You're just not doing the next part yet. So let's get clinical for a second because this matters. When you drink regularly, you're flooding your brain with artificial dopamine. Your brain gets lazy. It stops producing as much on its own. It's like, why should I make dopamine when this fool keeps dumping it in here for free? So when you quit, your brain is like a factory that's been shut down for years. The machinery's rusty, the workers are confused, and you're standing there going, why don't I feel joy? Why is everything so hard? Because your brain is rebuilding its dopamine system from scratch. And that takes 3 to 6 months on average. Some people see improvement at 30 days. Some people don't feel normal until 6 to 9 months. And in that window, you're going to feel anxious for no reason, depressed, even though life is better, anhedonic, which is just the fancy word for nothing feels good anymore. You're going to feel socially exhausted. You're going to feel like you're grieving something, even though you chose this and you know it's the right thing. That's not failure. That's biology. But here's where the character work comes in. Because while your brain is healing, you get to choose what you build in the meantime. You can spend that time white knuckling, or you can spend it dismantling the ego patterns and excuse making that kept you stuck in the first place. Most people don't even know they have a choice, but now you do. All right, let's talk about ego. And I need you to hear this really clearly. Your ego is not your enemy, but it is your obstacle. The ego is a self-centered, mind-made identity that's driven by fear. It's the voice in your head that constantly narrates who you are, what you deserve, and how you should be perceived. And an oversized ego and low self-esteem are two sides of the same coin. Both are rooted in a distorted sense of self. So let me show you how this plays out. The inflated ego is the version that tells you, I've got this under control. I'm not like those other people in recovery. I don't need meetings. I can have just one. I'm stronger now. That's not confidence. That's the ego fighting to maintain control. Because here's what the inflated ego is really scared of, right? It's really scared of being ordinary, being vulnerable, being someone who needs help. And when that ego is in charge, it convinces you that you're immune to relapse, that the rules don't apply to you, that asking for support is a sign of weakness. Until you're 6 months in, sitting alone with a drink in your hand, wondering how in the hell you got there. Now, the deflated ego, this is the ego built on inadequacy and shame. This one says, I'm broken, I'm not strong enough, everyone else can do this, but I can't, I've already messed up so much, what's the point? That's still ego, just pointed inward instead of outward. Because whether your ego is telling you you're better than everyone or worse than everyone, it's still making everything about you. It's still keeping you isolated and it's still blocking connection. And here's the kicker. Both versions of ego use the same defense mechanism: control. The inflated ego tries to control how others see you, and the deflated ego tries to control how much you let anyone in. Both are terrified of the same thing, and that's being seen as you actually are. And let's talk about this control piece for a second, because this is where ego does its most destructive work. When you were drinking, you probably told yourself you had it under control, even when you clearly didn't, even when your life was falling apart. That was the ego protecting itself through denial. And now that you're sober, that same need for control is still running the show. It just looks different. I have to do this perfectly. I can't let anyone see me struggle. If I could just figure out the right system, the right routine, the right mindset, then I'll be okay. But here's the truth. You can't control your way into emotional sobriety. Recovery requires the one thing your ego hates most: surrender. Not surrender as in giving up, but surrender as in admitting you're not in control, admitting you need help, admitting you're human. And that's terrifying, because if you admit you're not in control, then you have to face the reality of your behavior. You have to feel your feelings. You have to take accountability. And that's why the ego invents excuses. Because excuses are not just little lies we tell ourselves. Excuses are the primary tool the ego uses to avoid personal accountability. They're a form of denial. They protect you from facing the reality of your behavior, and they keep you trapped in patterns that no longer serve you. And in recovery, this shows up like justifying past actions, right? Oh, I wasn't that bad. Everyone drinks like that. I only hurt myself, not anyone else. These are excuses that let you avoid making amends, because if you convince yourself you didn't really do anything wrong, then you don't have to face the discomfort of apologizing, of repairing relationships, of acknowledging harm. But you can't heal what you won't acknowledge. It will also show up in like blaming others. Well, my family drove me to drink. If my partner wasn't so difficult, I wouldn't have needed alcohol. My job is so stressful. And look, maybe those things are true. Maybe your family is difficult. Maybe your job is stressful. But blaming others allows you to avoid taking responsibility for your choices. Because at the end of the day, no one poured the drink down your throat. No one forced you to keep going back. You did that. And until you own that, you can't change it. It'll also show up in like avoiding any kind of treatment or support. I'm not that bad yet. I can handle this on my own. Therapy isn't for me. I don't need a support group. That's for people who are really struggling. This is the ego's favorite excuse, because if you admit you need help, you're admitting you're not in control, and the ego will do anything to avoid that. But here's the reality. Needing help doesn't make you weak. Refusing help keeps you stuck. And sometimes it'll be waiting to be perfect before doing it. Well, as soon as I get this together, then I'll do that, right? Or I'll make amends when I've been sober longer. I need to get my life together first, then I'll reach out. I have to fix myself before I can fix my relationships. This is the insidious one because it sounds so reasonable. It sounds like you're being responsible, but really you're just delaying indefinitely because there is no perfect time to do a hard thing. There's just now. And the longer you wait, the more the ego convinces you that you're not ready. You'll never be ready. You just have to start. So here's what I want you to ask yourself this week. What excuse am I using right now to avoid doing the thing I know I need to do? Maybe it's joining a support group or going to therapy or having a hard conversation you've been avoiding. Whatever it is, your ego has an excuse ready, and that excuse sounds totally reasonable, totally justified. But is it true, or is it just keeping you safe? Excuses keep you safe, but they also keep you small. And emotional sobriety, real freedom, requires you to get uncomfortable. So we've talked about ego, we've talked about excuses. Now let's talk about the thing they're both preventing, and that's emotional sobriety. Bill Wilson, the founder of AA, wrote about this concept later in his life, and he said something I love. Emotional sobriety is about achieving real maturity and balance in our relationships with ourselves and others, not just abstaining from alcohol. Real maturity and balance. Because here's what emotional sobriety actually is. It's accepting all feelings. Emotional sobriety means you can sit with a full range of human emotion, positive and negative, without needing to suppress it, fix it, or act out on it. You don't drink to numb anxiety. You don't rage to avoid sadness. You don't isolate to escape vulnerability. You just feel it and let it move through you. And I know that sounds simple, but when you've spent years medicating your feelings with alcohol, this is terrifying because feelings are messy. They don't make sense. They're inconvenient. They show up at the worst times. But you can't think your way out of a feeling. You have to feel your way through it. Emotional sobriety is also avoiding self-destructive behaviors. It means you cope with stress in healthy ways. You don't return to old patterns when life gets hard. And let's be clear, quitting alcohol doesn't mean you've stopped using self-destructive coping mechanisms. It just means you removed one of them. You can still overwork or scroll social media to numb or overthink to feel like you're in control, isolate to avoid being seen, blame others to avoid accountability, do anything to avoid your feelings. Those are all ways to stay emotionally drunk. Emotional sobriety is about building new, healthy coping skills, skills that don't harm you, skills that don't keep you stuck. It's also moving beyond just abstinence. This is the big one. Sobriety is not the finish line. It's the starting point. Because if all you do is remove alcohol, but you don't address the ego, the excuses, the emotional patterns, then you're just a dry drunk. You're white knuckling your way through life, still controlled by the same fear, the same need for control, the same avoidance of vulnerability. Emotional sobriety is about becoming a different person, not just a sober version of your old self, but a fundamentally transformed version. And that requires character work. Emotional sobriety is also embracing vulnerability. This is the heart of it. You have to reduce the ego's power. You have to be able to acknowledge weaknesses, ask for help, admit when you're struggling. Let people see you as you are. That's humility, not self-deprecation, not shame. Humility. It's the ability to say, I don't have this figured out, and that's okay. I need support, and that doesn't make me weak. I was wrong. I'm sorry. I want to repair this. That's emotional sobriety. And you can't get there as long as your ego is in charge. All right, so here's what all this means practically. You've got 3 psychological patterns working against you. right? The ego creates a fragile self-image that's terrified of vulnerability. The excuses protect that fragile self-image by justifying harmful behavior and avoiding accountability. And the lack of emotional sobriety keeps you trapped in reactive, self-centered patterns that prevent you from really growing. This is the cycle. And it's the cycle that keeps people stuck even in sobriety. So how do you break it? Name the ego patterns. Start noticing when your ego is running the show and ask yourself, am I trying to control something I can't control? Am I avoiding vulnerability right now? Am I protecting my self-image instead of being honest? You don't have to fix it yet. Just notice it and challenge your excuses. Every time you catch yourself making an excuse, write it down and ask, is this true or does it just feel true? Is this protecting me or is it limiting me? What would I do if this excuse wasn't available? And then here's the hard part. Do that thing anyway. Not perfectly, not fearlessly, just do it. And build some emotional sobriety skills. This is where the real work happens. You need to learn how to sit with uncomfortable feelings without acting on them, how to regulate your nervous system when anxiety spikes, how to connect with others without needing armor. And I'm going to give you 3 tools to start, right? The first one is urge surfing. When a craving or an intense emotion hits, imagine it like a wave. It builds, it peaks, it passes. Don't fight it. Don't drown in it. Just ride it out. Build, peak, pass. And no, it will always pass. The pause. Between stimulus and response, there's a space. In that space is your power. Practice taking a breath before you react and ask yourself, what do I actually want to do here? And then a vulnerability practice. Once a week, practice letting someone see you. Tell a friend you're struggling. Ask for help with something. Share something you're afraid to share. Let the armor come off just a little bit and get support. You can't do character work alone. You need a group. You need a therapist who gets it. You need friends who are also doing the work, and you need accountability because the ego is sneaky. The excuses are convincing, and you need other people to call you on your patterns when you can't see them yourself. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. All right, let's bring this home. If you're listening to this and thinking, I've been sober for, days, weeks, months, and I still don't feel like myself, I want you to hear this. You're just in transition. And the work you're about to do, the character work, is the work that actually changes your life. Because sobriety is the foundation, character is the house. And character is built by dismantling the ego's need for control, stopping the excuses that keep you stuck, and developing emotional sobriety, which is the ability to feel everything without being controlled by it. This is not easy work. This is not quick work. But this is the work that makes sobriety sustainable. This is the work that takes you from life is just less complicated to life is genuinely good. It takes you from I'm 70% of the person I was to I'm becoming someone I actually respect, from white knuckling to real freedom. So here's your homework for this week. Name one ego pattern you're noticing in yourself right now. Just notice it. Don't judge it. Just notice that damn thing. Challenge one excuse you've been using to avoid something hard and write down the 3 questions I went through and then do the thing anyway. And practice one emotional sobriety skill, urge surfing, the pause, or vulnerability. Pick one and try it. And if you're still struggling, if you need more support, ask for it. Join a meeting, schedule a therapy appointment, reach out to a friend, let someone in. Because quitting is about so much that isn't alcohol. And you don't have to figure that out alone. Emotional sobriety isn't about perfection. It's about ownership. It's about being brave enough to see where you're still hiding behind fear, ego, control, and old patterns, and deciding that you're not going to live that way anymore. Because like I said earlier, if you don't grow, you decay. If you don't lead your life, you drift. And drifting is just relapse in slow motion. If this episode hit you, that's not random. That means you're at a crossroads. You can stay where you are, stuck in your head, recycling the same week over and over again, or step into action and rebuild yourself from the inside out. How you think, how you respond, how you show up, and build a life that actually feels good to wake up to. And if you want help doing that, then you and I are sober soulmates. Whether you're a good starter but can't seem to follow through, or you've been sober for a while, but you know you're leaving some potential on the table, or you're just tired of your own damn excuses, book a call with me. We'll get clear on where you are, what needs to change, and exactly what we're going to do about it. And if we're a good fit, we can start working together right now. We can do the Recovery Accelerator or my 6-week private coaching program. We'll decide that on the call. No more circling the same problems. No more waiting for motivation. No more convincing yourself later. If you're ready, book the call. The link is always in the show notes, or you can go to addictionunlimited.com/call. Your next level doesn't just show up. You have to build it. Okay. And don't forget this Friday, a bonus drop from the Unlimited Life Starter Series, the 10 most powerful episodes. You guys are giving me great feedback on these Friday episodes, so you'll have another one of those coming this Friday. I love you guys. I hope you're having a fantastic day, and I will see you next week.
You've reached the end of another great episode of the Addiction Unlimited podcast. Candid and honest conversation about addiction and recovery. Be sure to visit us at addictionunlimited.com to join the conversation and access show notes and links to everything we talked about. Love this episode? Please take 30 seconds to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes to help us improve and give you the information you want. Thanks for listening. See you next week.